This is a Fatal 4 podcast.
Side to side, it's time for Squared Circle Strafe, the premier video game podcast of the Fatal 4 podcasting network. I am your host, Pro Wrestling Noah, aka Noah Stewart, and it's time to talk about video games. Hello everyone, welcome in to the show. It's time to talk about video games. Hey there everyone, sorry again about the little hiatus we had there, as I'm continuing to try and figure out my work schedule around the times that I record this show. Hopefully I will get that figured out sooner than later, but I had to squeeze in some time during this weekend to record something about video games because it has been a very eventful week about video games. For good and bad, I would say. There's some stuff happening. Not just in the world of video games, it's affecting the world of video games. Just, gestures at everything here in the US. But hey, at least there's some stuff to look forward to with, all the stuff happening. So why don't we get into it? The most exciting thing, obviously, was Nintendo had their Switch 2 Direct on April 2nd and had a lot of stuff to show off. I was expecting maybe just like some extra details about the Switch and then maybe a look at a couple games maybe, but they showed a lot of stuff. More stuff than I think people were expecting to even be possible on the Switch. But they led off the presentation with the first game, obviously a game in a franchise that the original Switch, I believe still to this day, continues to sell copies of. But, they have to make a new one eventually, right? It's been about a decade since the last one. That's right, folks. Mario Kart World. They showed a trailer for the new Mario Kart, and oh man, does it look fantastic. Hey, turns out Mario Kart's really good. And I was, they could have just made a new Mario Kart with some spiffied up graphics, maybe a handful of new characters, some new courses, obviously, and called it a day. But they are adding some pretty cool features into this one. I think the most prominent being that there are now 24 racers in a single race now, which means that they've added a lot of characters, those being like a bunch of the just kind of background like enemy characters or just like background NPCs and such. The one that the internet especially is most excited for is the Moo cows from Moo Farms, the N64 Mario Kart level. Big cow, I would say, rivaled by the Harvest Moon cow for cutest cow in video games. It's very, very good looking cow. Real cute, very round, very excited to drive around as cow. Then there's also different costumes you can have for characters, like palette swaps and stuff. Think about like Super Smash Brothers style kind of palette swaps for characters, but instead of like in Super Smash Bros, usually that means like literally palette swaps, but in this it's straight up different outfits. Like they showed Peach in like a summer outfit, a motorcycle outfit, a racing outfit, kind of looked like a tennis outfit. Very cool there. And then the other kind of big thing about the feature set here is that in Mario Kart, you usually have the Grand Prix, like the cup that you do, which is usually 4 races in a row. And then, points are tallied and whoever has the most points at the end of the Grand Prix wins the cup. But in this, they have a mode where you are able to race through an entire Grand Prix in one go. It's like all the tracks lead into each other in one big race. And I believe there's checkpoints, so you'll be like tallying points as you go. But it's pretty much just that there's no menus to button through after each stint of the race. The race just keeps going, and I think that's pretty cool. Also, some rolling starts as opposed to stationary starts, like in Formula One racing. After you come out of a what do you call it, a safety car or something, and then everyone has a rolling start to get the action restarted again. That might be something involved in this, but it's some really cool stuff. They also have off-road racing. They have some your cart turns into a boat or a jet ski, travel across water. All of the stages have different weather changes that are, I assume, random and will change how the course acts in different types of weather. Just some really, really cool different stuff going. Oh, and there's also a free roam mode, which kind of makes me think of Tony Hawk Pro Skater in the ways that you could just like go into free skate mode and just kind of explore the levels. You can do that too here. I don't really know how much that will be a important thing for Mario Kart. Maybe just becoming more familiar with turns in the course. If anything, I feel like it'll just be a fun thing to explore the boundaries of the level, just kind of going off course and just going, well, what's over here? What's behind this little hill or this mountain? What's like, there's all these toads, mining this mountain for minerals. What are they up to? Let's go check them out. Just some fun little Nintendo secrets. I'm sure that'll be really, entertaining to go see and check out. And then after they showed off all the Mario Kart World stuff, they then showed a new feature for the Switch, that being what that C button do. That's right. We were talking like a month ago about what the C button do, but at the time it was just a mystery button. It was just a little square button that was showing up in the trailers that they didn't point out what it was or what it did, and they didn't have any marcation on it, but they have now added the letter C to it. And it turns out the C stands for communication or chat, because it opens up the game chat feature of the Switch 2, which allows you to basically enter a Discord-like application on the Switch 2. It just straight up looks like Discord. Basically, you are able to chat with friends over the system application. Think like the party system on the PlayStation or whatever the Xbox has. I haven't really messed around with any recent Xboxes myself lately, but you have little windows pop up on the screen. You can either have your avatar and no camera, or they have a camera that you can buy, the Nintendo Switch 2 camera, which is just basically a little webcam on a pedestal that you can put next to wherever your Switch is docked. And the way they presented it really made it seem like a kind of a streamer setup, where it will like blur out the background and you can add fun backgrounds behind you, kind of keying out your actual background to add whatever you want back there, or even over gameplay. They were showing stuff like the new Mario Party, where it will have the little player icon indicators showing what player is controlling what character. And instead of saying, oh, player 1 is here, it has your camera footage on the little indicator. So I'm sure there'll be fun little Nintendo touches like that. And then as far as the microphone, the audio pickup for the game chat goes, They have a microphone on the Switch 2, which is a new feature for the Switch. But the microphone is just a little tiny dot, like open space on top of the Switch. Think like the old Nintendo DS, the little microphone that was on that you would blow into for WarioWare games and stuff. It basically looks like that, but what they were saying is that the microphone is so good that it's able to pick you up from across the room and sound like just fine. And I don't know how much I believe that. I don't know, like, if they just have like some kind of insane audio like cleanup technology in real time that they are able to do with like such a weird little microphone like that. But I guess we will wait and see how good that is when it comes out. Then they showed off the local play options they have called for Game Share, which in the past on the Switch, you would have to, if you wanted to play a multiplayer game locally, each console would have to have its own copy of the game. But now you're able to open up multiplayer to other Switch consoles and have everyone join in on just one cartridge. If one person has the cartridge, everyone can play multiplayer on it, which I think is really great. Kind of the more traditional couch co-op experience or couch multiplayer experience that you would have with your friends back in the day. Just, all gathering around a console, but instead everyone gathering around with multiple handheld consoles, which it kind of also reminds me of the PSP had the ad hoc option, which was basically the same thing where you could play multiplayer off of one, copy of the game. So very cool stuff there. And then this one, the next thing they showed off was the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour, which basically looks like a isometric interactive instruction manual about the Switch 2. It's kind of like a, exploded autopsy, diagram of the Switch 2 with a bunch of little characters running around on it, and you can interact with different buttons and compartments of the Switch, kind of giving you a very clear look at what all the new features for it are. And you see that and you think to yourself, oh, that's like a fun little thing that'll come included with the Switch, right? Right? No, it turns out that in a very Nintendo move, this will be a paid title that you will have to spend money on in order to check out, which the PS5 had Astro's Playroom as a free pack-in, and that was like a full-ass video game. That was a character 3D platformer that just also happened to have a lot feature the PlayStation hardware in a fun way. This seems like I said, a glorified instruction manual for the Switch, and they are expecting you to pay money for it. And I don't know, it might be like $5. I couldn't imagine paying any more than $10 for this. And keep in mind, these are the same people that had you pay, I believe it was like $60 for 1-2 Switch at launch, which was also kind of a hey, check out all the new features of the Switch kind of thing. And not a lot of people really experienced that because it seemed like something that was very very thin content wise and was maybe not worth that much money. So hopefully they at least learn from that and don't charge a ton of money for something that is basically a commercial for what the Switch has to offer this time around. But I guess we'll wait and see on that. But speaking of new features with the Switch 2, they also showed off an updated version of Super Mario Party Jamboree, the most recent Super Mario Party title, with some new console-specific enhancements for the Switch 2. That being a minigame called Bowser Live, which utilizes the microphone and has players do karaoke or some sort of rhythm game, perhaps. and other stuff involving the microphone, like blowing into it to have characters fly on hang gliders. I assume I could only assume that a video game like that would exist, but possibly something having to do with the camera. I'm sure they will add a bunch of new stuff. But that's the other thing, is that they will have a line of enhanced versions of Switch 1 games that will be paid upgrades. I believe Super Mario Party Jamboree, it will be free for people who currently own Super Mario Party Jamboree, but there will also be I would assume like on the PlayStation 5, how you can buy enhanced like PS5 versions of PS4 games for like a $10 upgrade. I'm sure it won't be that crazy of monetarily to upgrade into the new version. But they did show off some Nintendo Switch 2 editions of the Legend of Zelda games for Switch, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and showed off some footage of how those run. And boy, they look so much better. They look so much. The frame rate looks so much cleaner, because if you remember, even Breath of the Wild as a launch game on the Switch got pretty stuttery at times. Like the Switch was just really the original Switch was just never able to really handle big open worlds like that. But it looks like the Switch 2 has enough horsepower to really present those worlds in the way that they were always intended to. So possibly, I never finished Tears of the Kingdom, so I might get the enhanced version and really get back into it. We'll see. And they haven't said yet, but I can only assume that. Oh wait, no, I think Pokemon has said. They didn't say it in this stream, but I believe Pokemon Company has said that they will be doing Switch 2 enhanced versions of Scarlet and Violet, which that game desperately needs, because that was always the biggest detriment of that game, is that it ran like crap. And hopefully this will make it so that it actually functions. It runs like a video game, and so that more people besides the diehard Pokemon fans will be able to truly enjoy it. And then they also showed off the new mouse functionality of the Joy-Cons, where you kind of snap it off the system and drag it along a flat surface to act like a mouse. And weirdly enough, the game that they decided to show off that functionality with was a game called Drag X Drive, which is a basketball game entirely featuring teams of characters in wheelchairs that you use two Joy-Cons and slide them on a surface to simulate pushing the wheels in your wheelchair to then go, shoot basketballs at goals. Not something that I was expecting. I'm sure I bet it controls really neat. I'm sure it'll be like a fun novelty. I was just not expecting wheelchair basketball to be the thing that they would lead with to show off their mouse functionality. But hey, I'm sure that'll be something noteworthy when it comes out. Then there also is a ton of third-party games coming to the Switch. Finally, a Nintendo console truly able to kind of hang with the current crop of third-party offerings that other consoles are, really seeing the benefit of, like Elden Ring, Split Fiction, Hogwarts Legacy, Hades 2, which is really big for them because Hades 1 was such a big game on the original Switch. Street Fighter 6, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 and 4 will be coming to the Switch too. Hitman World of Assassination, Cyberpunk, which is kind of crazy. And a number of incoming games like Civilization 7 will implement the Joy-Con 2's mouse functionality. And then they showed off another new Zelda game, but not a mainline one, mind you, but a new Hyrule Warriors game, the Zelda-based Musou. I think Dynasty Warriors, but with Zelda characters. This being the Age of Imprisonment which, much like the Hyrule Warriors game before it, kind of shows off the kind of backstory of Tears of the Kingdom, whereas the one, the previous one showed off the backstory of Breath of the Wild. This shows off the time that Zelda spent hanging out with the, what are they called, the Zonai in the Tears of the Kingdom story. So if you like Musos, I'm sure that'll be a good one. I'm sure it'll run run a lot better on the Switch 2 than the last one ran on the original Switch, having, a game having to deal with so many enemy character models at the same time. And here's another thing that the Switch can finally handle. And this is a big one. This is something that everyone's been clamoring for as soon as the Nintendo Switch Online service suite of old Nintendo games that you have access to has been a thing. They are finally giving you access to GameCube games on the Switch. They showed off the first games they will be adding to the service is Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, which is honestly kind of weirdly disappointing because I feel like everyone has been anticipating the HD remastered version that was on the Wii U to be ported to the Switch eventually. But instead, they're giving us the original GameCube version before we get that, if we ever get that, which is frustrating not only because I assume it looks a little lower definition than the HD version, but also because the HD version streamlined the sailing in Wind Waker and made it a little less tedious. So it's also a game that is like a little doesn't have as many quality of life improvements as the HD remaster had. But hey, if you're a Wind Waker diehard, you will have access to that game on the Switch now, as well as Soul Calibur 2. And it being the GameCube version means that you have access to Link as a playable character, as a playable fighter in Soul Calibur 2. And then also F-Zero GX, which was the F-Zero racing game for the GameCube and is one of the most difficult racing games I have ever played. It is blisteringly fast and extremely hard to control at times, but it's a game that at the time, it was hard to get a rush quite like it in any other game. And there will also be a lot more GameCube games coming to the service after that they will kind of drip feed us like Nintendo usually does. Games already confirmed for the service are Super Mario Sunshine, Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, Super Mario Strikers, Chibi Robo, which I'm very excited for, Luigi's Mansion, and Pokemon Colosseum were all titles that were shown off in the reveal trailer. Honestly, kind of surprised that we're getting those Pokemon games. I think those are games that are kind of pretty rare and expensive now, but we'll now have, more free access to, so that'll be cool. Of course, I say free. I believe the access to these games will be part of the expansion pass, tier of the online service that you get from Nintendo. But if you're already, if you're already a big NSO fan and like having access to these games on your Switch, that'll just be another thing coming to you. And then there was a big reveal that I don't think a lot of people saw coming. Nintendo Switch 2 will have an exclusive title from Software, that being the Duskbloods, which is kind of a silly name, but it's from Software. It looks very Bloodborne coded, and it will be directed by Miyazaki, so the director from all of the From Software games that everyone likes a lot. And upon first reveal, you think, oh, like this is just basically a spiritual successor to Bloodborne. But then after the stream, some headlines were showing up saying that this is actually a multiplayer focused game, kind of PvPvE kind of situation, which a lot of the Dark Souls from Soft games are like that, are kind of, PvPvE in a sense that you can get invaded by other players or players can help you fight bosses and such. But it seems like from the marketing, they are really hammering home the fact that this will be a multiplayer-focused title, kind of like the Elden Ring Night Rain game that they are also working on. But the interesting thing here is that it is exclusive to the Switch 2, which I'm sure some Sony fans will be a little butthurt by, what seems to be, at least aesthetically, the successor to Bloodborne being exclusive to the Switch 2. But at the very least, maybe, it being multiplayer focused, we'll see how fleshed out of an experience it actually ends up being. Knowing from Software, I'm sure it'll be good regardless. So they're known for their quality releases. And then that was kind of a big banger announcement. They had kind of a trio of big mic drops at the end of this stream. The second being the reveal of the sequel to a GameCube darling, Kirby Air Riders, coming to the Switch 2, a successor to Kirby Air Ride, the Kirby-based racing game from the GameCube. And it's also being directed by Sakurai, so it's like legit. Kirby is very precious to Sakurai, so I'm sure he demanded to be involved in this project, and we are very excited for it. At least in the trailer, it showed it's a racing game, but I think what people are really wanting, whenever I talk to the Kirby Air Ride sickos, it's usually in the context of talking about the city battle mode that everyone just knows like the back of their hand. I don't really hear people talk about the racing in that game as much as they talk about the city mode in that game. So here's hoping that they have something close to that in this game. I'm sure they will, reveal more about it coming soon, because I believe it's gonna be a pretty early title in the lineup of launch titles here. And speaking of launch titles, we also have, or I'm sorry, not launch title, but in the launch window, a new 3D Donkey Kong game, Donkey Kong Bonanza, complete with new art aesthetic design Donkey Kong, kind of a more cartoonish look to him. He's got kind of more inset eyes, a really expressive face. He looks great, folks. This Donkey Kong looks so good. And the gameplay, it's a 3D platformer, but it looks like you're just smashing through stuff with your big Donkey Kong arms, like busting through walls and mountains and ground and stuff. And I have seen a little bit of gameplay, and I can confirm that when you collect a big banana, Donkey Kong goes, "Ooh, banana." So that they're doing it right, folks. They're doing it. They're really living up to expectations here. So can't wait for Donkey Kong Bonanza. They showed off some really good there's some really good reasons to get a Switch 2, which, really hoping that I can get one at launch. We'll see. There's a lot of kind of stuff in flux about that right now, but why don't we take a break, and when we come back, I will get to kind of what some of the issues are regarding the Switch 2's launch. See you in a second. And we're back, folks, and let's get into some of the other news hitting us this week. This news specifically is coming in hot, comes to us from this day that I'm recording this, April 4th, that is impacting the U.S. pre-orders of the Switch 2, and that is again, and also this news comes to us from videogameschronicle.com. Nintendo delays Switch 2 pre-orders in the US due to Trump tariffs. Here in the US, we are dealing with some presidential drama, to say it the lightest as I can, as Trump is imposing a bunch of tariffs on imports into the country. This from the article itself. Nintendo has said it won't start Nintendo Switch 2 pre-orders in the US yet, so that it has access to market conditions. Pre-orders for Nintendo's new console went live in Europe and the UK this week following the firm's Nintendo Direct presentation. Now Nintendo has said that it won't open pre-orders to customers in the US yet due to the country's turbulent financial situation. Pre-orders for Nintendo Switch 2 in the US will not start April 9th, 2025 in order to assess the potential impact of tariffs and evolving market conditions, Nintendo said in a statement to GameSpot. Nintendo will update timing at a later date. The launch of June 5th, 2025 is unchanged. U.S. President Donald Trump has been imposing tariffs on numerous countries in recent weeks, including a sizable tariff in China, where tech producers are where tech products are often manufactured. On Wednesday, he also introduced a blanket 10% tariff on all imports with countries like China and Japan, what Trump calls the, quote, worst offenders, unquote, getting larger tariffs of 54% and 24% respectively. A report from the Financial Times last month suggested that Nintendo had already been shifting production away from China since Trump's first administration stated its intent to upend global trading, noting that more than half of the half of the hardware Nintendo imports into the US comes from Vietnam and Cambodia. However, the tariffs imposed by Trump on Wednesday, which he says will go into effect on April 9th, include a 46% tariff on Vietnam and a 49% tariff on Cambodia. According to Financial Times sources, hundreds of thousands of Switch 2 consoles have already been sent from Vietnam to Nintendo's U.S. facilities since the start of the year, perhaps in anticipation of such a move. The standalone Switch 2 console will cost $449.99 in the US. The bundle version, which includes a digital version of Mario Kart World, will cost $499.99. In Japan, the situation is somewhat different. Their players will be able to buy the Switch 2 from retail stores for 49,980 yen, comparable to $334 US, but this version will be region locked to Japan. This domestic-only console will only have Japanese as the console's language option, and the only Nintendo account that can be linked to it will be the one created with the country region settings set to Japan. Japanese players who want the multilingual region-free edition of Switch 2 can only purchase it from the Japanese My Nintendo store at a price of 69,980 yen, comparable to $467. So, bit of a bummer, very doom feeling, just gestures and everything. But yeah, so we'll just have to wait and see. Thankfully, it looks like the launch of the Switch 2 will still be June 5th. They are still planning on that. We will just have to wait and see about when we are able to do pre-orders, as they've said, assessing the situation as far as the U.S. trade and tariff situation goes. I'm wondering if they are doing that just to assess how much product they are going to end up being able to, provide for the U.S. market, because apparently the price, at least from what they've said so far, the price will remain at the $449.99 price point for the base model, $500 for the bundle. But yeah, we're in a wait and see situation there. And I guess we'll find out what happens. Hopefully, I'll have some news for you next week. But boy, the interesting times we live in. The impossible pivot out of that into some other interesting industry news, that being the situation with Ubisoft, as I feel like I am always talking about the situation with Ubisoft on this podcast. In their most recent move, Ubisoft and Tencent unveil new subsidiary for Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Rainbow Six. The new subsidiary will be based on the Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Tom Clancy Rainbow Six brands, and will be backed by greater investment and boosted creative capabilities, quote unquote, in an attempt to push each series forwards. The subsidiary has been valued at around 4 billion euros, and Tencent will be investing 1.16 billion euros to gain a minority stake of around 25% in it. What exactly this means for fans of the series remains to be seen at this stage, but the investment by Tencent likely gives it a degree of influence over the future direction of Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Rainbow Six. Ubisoft says the new subsidiary backed by Tencent's investment will, quote-unquote, drive further increases in quality of narrative, solo experiences, expand multiplayer offerings with increased frequency of content release, introduce free-to-play touchpoints, and integrate more social features. Whatever all that means. The new subsidiary will include the teams developing the Tom Clancy Rainbow Six, Assassin's Creed, and Far Cry franchises based in Montreal, Quebec, Sherbrooke, Saguenay, I'm saying that right, Barcelona, and Sofia, as well as the back catalog and any new games currently under development or to be developed, it added. Today, Ubisoft is opening a new chapter in its history, Ubisoft co-founder and CEO Yves Guillemot said in a statement. As we accelerate the company's transformation, this is a foundational step in changing Ubisoft's operating model that will enable us to be both agile and ambitious. We are focused on building strong game ecosystems designed to become evergreen, growing high-performing brands, and creating new IPs powered by cutting-edge and emerging technologies. He goes on and on about, the kind of buzzwordy stuff like that. So alongside creation of the new subsidiary, Ubisoft says it will continue working on other IP outside of the 3 that have moved over. So what this appears to be is, so Assassin's Creed Shadows came out and performed well. They had over 2 million players within the first week of the game launching, which is great. And I think it performed well in terms of AAA game releases, but it did not, do as well as what they wanted it to do based on their metrics, which kind of really seemed like an impossible task. I don't think one game could really save the entire company in the state that Ubisoft is in currently. So what they are kind of doing is opening up this subsidiary with Tencent and moving what I believe they think to be their most profitable IP, that being Rainbow Six, Far Cry, and Assassin's Creed, in an attempt to, if things do go bad and they have to declare bankruptcy or shutter or whatever ends up happening with Ubisoft, they will at least have a little life raft of, their most important things to their bottom line over at Tencent. So interesting times for Ubisoft. We'll see what happens with whatever they have cooking in the hopper at the moment. I know they have another Ubisoft, I believe it's Ubisoft or Assassin's Creed game, Assassin's Creed Nexus, I want to say it's called, in development. So yeah. Oh, Ubisoft. we're pulling for you. And then I have there was a lot of Nintendo new games being announced this week, but there's also some other non-Nintendo stuff kind of bubbling up to the surface. A new God of War side story project set in Greece is coming this year, it's claimed. Rumors have circulated for some time about a remastered collection of God of War titles set for this year, timed for the franchise's 20th anniversary. Now, GiantBomb.com's Jeff Grubb has claimed that a new God of War side story project set in Greece is coming this year. The first several entries in the series were set in Greece and focused on Greek mythology before moving to Norse mythology in 2018's God of War reboot. While God of War director Cory Barlog has previously said that he never planned for a second God of War trilogy based on the 2018 game, the conclusion to God of War Ragnarok left the story open for more titles. Everyone keeps asking about this, so I've tried to find out more, Grubb wrote on Blue Sky. There's still a Greek God of War thing coming out this year, but it's not a remaster collection, it's a new side story project. Grubb then added, I was never told about a remaster collection, but I asked a source about the rumors that I saw were focused on a collection, and they told me that nothing God of War would happen at the State of Play, but something could show up at the anniversary. Sony has announced its plans to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the God of War franchise. The celebration will include new in-game content for God of War Ragnarok, new merchandise, and a physical art exhibition. So, some interesting stuff coming. I don't know what the scope and size of this side story project could be. It could be, a $40 smaller experience. It could be a, bigger, more fleshed out thing, maybe in the scope of something like the Uncharted. What was that one called? It was the one with Chloe. It was like the dual protagonist one. Lost Legacy. Could be something closer to that in scope, where it's kind of in between a side game and a full more fleshed out project. Maybe something more recently, maybe something more along the lines of a Miles Morales Spider-Man. Which those experiences tend to be pretty tight and exciting. So, looking forward to. I love God of War, especially. I've played the 2018 God of War. I've yet to play Ragnarok. I really need to get around to it. But I love that original trilogy on the PlayStation 2 and 3, respectively. So I am looking forward to whatever this ends up being. And speaking of things to look forward to, Night Dive says it wants to start remastering Xbox 360 and PS3 era games. Night Dive specializes in taking retro polygonal games that are no longer easily playable on modern hardware and releasing HD remasters on PC and console. Recent releases have included The Thing, the Turok trilogy, System Shock, Forsaken, Doom 64, Quake, Quake 2, Shadow Man, Blade Runner, PO'd, Rise of the Triad, and Star Wars Dark Forces. For the most part, the studio focuses on games that originally had PC versions, then ports those to modern systems using its proprietary KEX engine. However, in recent discussion with VGC, Night Dive studio head Stephen Kick and director of business development Larry Cooperman said they were keen to start looking at potential remasters of games that were only released on Xbox 360 or PS3. We stand ready, Cooperman said, when asked how they would handle each game given how many studios from that era have closed down. He then noted that there were numerous aspects to take into account. I would begin asking a couple questions, he explained. What was it Xbox 360 exclusive, or was there a PC version out too? Because that also changes things a little. Preservation that's available. Do we have source code? If so, what's the quality of the source code? How about the assets? Those are the kinds of considerations that we have there. That being said, there were some really good games that came out in that era that shouldn't be lost. unquote, kick added. To your point, though, with a game like Haze, let's say, hypothetically, we had access to that, and that was our big title for 2028, right? We would go into the original designers and we would say, it didn't do as well as you had hoped. I'm sure you've had a lot of time to ruminate and to think about what you would have done differently. I love that they're bringing up Haze as a potential candidate for bringing back these Xbox 360, PS3 era shooters. Because that's a game that I think about a lot when I think about that era of shooters. I think about Haze, because that was a time in shooters when everyone was really trying to be the Halo killer. Everyone was trying to think of like what would be the next big first person shooter franchise to take the crown. I know Killzone was really had their eye on that crown for a long time and never quite did it. I like the Killzone franchise, by the way, but yeah, it was never quite up there. And there were plenty of other, like Haze and Legendary, The Darkness. There was all sorts. There is more games like that you can readily count on two hands from that era. So there's a lot of potential there, and I'm really excited about that too, because the PS3 and the Xbox 360 are consoles that are still, the emulation scene for those consoles is still in a state that is not the most solid. Like you kind of have to be a little tricky, be a little. You really have to know your way around setting up those emulators to really get them to work properly. So having Night Dive just be able to bring out new versions of them that are readily accessible on modern consoles and PC would be excellent. So I am very much looking forward to this new era of games that Night Dive will be exploring. I can't wait to see what they announce first. And then last thing for new potential games coming out, leaked screens offer first glimpse at Respawn's Star Wars strategy game. The unnamed turn-based strategy game is set to be revealed on Saturday, April 19th at Star Wars Celebration in Tokyo, Japan. Little is known about the game, which was announced alongside Respawn's shooter and the third entry in the Star Wars Jedi franchise. It's being developed through a production collaboration with Bit Reactor, which is a new studio formed by veterans of XCOM and Civilization studio Firaxis. Respawn is producing the game while Bit Reactor leads in the development. According to the images, which were discovered by MP First and said to be from mid-2023, the game will have a turn-based setup that looks very similar to XCOM games, which is perhaps unsurprising considering its development talent. So, yeah, I'm looking at these screenshots and it looks all pretty much just like like XCOM, maybe some different creatively looking aiming, like reticle, zones that you can do, like attack range and stuff from. But it's got Mandalorians taking cover behind chest high walls and looking at enemy characters with, percentage to hit them with, various different attack options and such. Looks like there's also an astromech droid, an R2D2 like guy on your team as well. So hey, I am down for a AAA Star Wars strategy game. I am super for that. I like me some XCOM, and if you just splashing on some Star Wars flavor, that now we're cooking, folks. So be on the lookout for, I guess, an announcement for that in the next 2 weeks or so to get an official reveal for whatever this game ends up being called. But hey, it looks good to me. Why don't we take another quick break here, folks? And when we come back, I will tell you about some of the video games I've been playing during this little break we've had in the schedule. See you in a little bit. All right, and we're back, folks, and I've been playing some video games. There have been some some pretty hot releases in the past couple weeks, in the past month or so. One of the biggest ones that I've been spending a decent amount of time with, more than, I guess, I think my in-game clock says something close to 35 hours at this point. Monster Hunter Wilds, the new hotness, at least in my friend groups of gamers. I am now past the kind of introductory part of the game. Monster Hunter games, there's a first set of credits that roll that gets you through what's basically the tutorial, and then there's what's essentially the second tutorial that shows you more advanced stuff in the second part of the story. Then you get the second set of credits, and then the game starts. So I am basically in the second set tutorial. I'm at the part where I am getting caps on my hunter rank. I am hunter rank, I think like 35 at this point. I think I'm in the 30s. So making my way through. I already have friends that are like hunter rank 100 plus at this point. I think a new update actually just hit yesterday. So I'm kind of lagging behind. I need to get in gear to catch up with everyone. But yeah, hoping that I can get through that. But I'm having a great time with it. I'm currently playing. I started off playing Hammer and my tried and true switch axe. I think switch axe is probably my favorite weapon in the game. But then I also decided to play around with sword and shield, which I'm enjoying a lot. That weapon has a lot of mobility compared to the other weapons. And that's like the big thing in Monster Hunter, right? Is kind of picking the play style that you want and works best for, what your taste is. And I have some friends that are playing around with the Hunter Horn, which really seems like once I really get my Monster Hunter legs under me again, that I would like to try that out, because it is very much like, the Bard class, kind of, if you know what that means, of Monster Hunter, where you're doing like a bunch of buffs and debuffs for your party and the enemies alike. But it acts very much like a hammer. It's just like a big horn that you smack monsters with, but also plays music, which is fun. I haven't played around with any of the ranged weapons yet. I have friends who are playing, trying out the bow gun and stuff like that. But yeah, this is really, when it comes down to it, this is my second Monster Hunter game. The only Monster Hunter game I had really, really gotten into before this one was Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate for the 3DS. And I completely missed Wilds. I think I just was like in between consoles at that point when that game came out. So I just for whatever reason did not get into it. But I am really, really enjoying Wilds. Last one was Worlds. Did I say Worlds? Wilds, the most recent game. Yeah, I'm digging it a lot. I need to play more of it, honestly. I've kind of been switching back and forth between that and the other game I've been playing the most recently being Avowed. I'm still trucking my way through Avowed. I'm almost done with it. I'm in what I believe is the last big open area of the game. I'm in like the 4th zone. Just made my way through the 3rd zone, added the Animancer and the Wizard characters to my party. I'm now running around with like, four different characters, 2 of which you can have in the party at any given time. Just some really neat story moments in that game. Some that just like have a lot of nuance. There was a moment in the second area where you have to encounter a boss character, like basically like what would be the like main boss of that area of that big, open world zone. And my intelligence was high enough that I was able to negotiate my way out of that encounter. Instead of having the boss fight, I just convinced that boss to give me what I needed. And they were like, you know what? Yeah, you're right. We don't have to come to blows on this. You can just leave and everything will be fine. So we did that. And it was great. Just like a really neat, like actual role-playing game moment that I thought was really, really cool that I was able to pull off. And then there's also there's a moment in the third open area where you have to make a big story choice moment that, affects like where the story goes. And out of the two choices you can make, there's really not a good choice. Both the choices that you make have consequences, and not everyone in your party is happy about the choice that you make. You're not going to satisfy everyone in the game, and you will also feel bad about some of the stuff that comes out of either of those choices. I made what I thought was maybe the most logical choice, the one that had the least amount of bad, but I still feel bad when I encounter characters that say that I, ended up killing a bunch of people because of that decision. So that's something I appreciate, because I feel like a lot of games, when they have you make choices like that, it's either, do you want to save the baby or kill the baby? Like, it's, very black and white, good or evil choices. But this game has like actual, like, interesting role-playing game choices, and I appreciate that about Avowed. On top of it just being a game that controls really well and has, really engaging, character tree and options for combat. I am still trucking along with my wizard build, still, shooting stuff with my wand and having various different types of spells. I gravitate toward the elemental spells mostly. I'm running around with a ice grimoire right now that gives me access to like all the different levels of ice spell, where I can, summon a blizzard or shoot a cone of frost at someone or bring down a giant like iceberg on people basically, and freeze them up and shatter them. It's really satisfying. So I love the way that game plays. I can't wait to, I think that's going to be the game that I will focus on this weekend, is Avowed, and really attempt to finish it this weekend, because in the Xbox Game Pass, suite and schedule coming up, South of Midnight is the next game that's going to be coming out this coming Tuesday. I think it's coming out next week. So I really want to have Avowed kind of off my plate before I dive into South of Midnight. So hopefully I'm able to do that. And then there's been some other like not so current games that I've been playing on my Steam Deck recently. Especially it's been fun because my wife got me the Steam Deck dock for the television in our bedroom. So I'm able to, play some stuff that she would like to watch me play. One of those things being Faith, the Unholy Trilogy, sorry. Which is just a delightful, delightful. It's a very upsetting horror game that looks like like an Atari or Commodore 64 style, like 4-bit retro game where you play as a priest in an exorcist like situation, where you are an exorcist. You go to a family's home and perform exorcisms, but you have like a troubled past. There was an exorcism that went bad, and you're trying to atone for the mistakes you made in that exorcism. And it's like really basic, like think like Adventure for the Atari 2600, where it's just like top down, moving through environments, very archaic, basic graphics where there isn't a lot of definition on anything. It's just solid, blocky textures. But the way that they do the sound design in the game is eerie and off-putting. The intro cutscene is your priest character driving to the house, and it's just like, I must make up for what I have done. Like, it's just like really crazy, distorted, old video game, like bleeps and bloops mashed into dialogue that is really off-putting. And then you will see creatures show up, but then they will just suddenly cut to a cutscene of those creatures in what appears to be rotoscoped animation of like actual actors with like Atari 2600 graphics plastered over them. And it is really crazy to look at. Some like really upsetting monsters coming at you in really surprising ways. I ended up playing all of it. It gets really crazy towards the end. A lot of like crazy cult stuff happening. And yeah, I would if you are into horror games, it's definitely it's a recommended one. It's kind of, at this point, I think it's kind of essential reading at this point. Especially because I believe that the studio that made that game finally teamed up with a movie studio, and they're making a movie based on Faith, which I think is interesting. Like, the story itself is like cool and fine. I don't necessarily know what it has to offer in the context of a movie, because I feel like so much of the juice that Faith has as a horror game comes from its like Atari 2600, Commodore 64, very lo-fi video game aesthetic. But if they're able to incorporate some of those aesthetics into the movie, I think that could be something pretty neat. I haven't heard of the guy who is directing it. I'm not really familiar with his previous work, so I can't really say, like, speak to the potential quality of the movie, but it is definitely something that I will be interested in checking out once it comes out. And then another thing that I've been playing, I actually finished Everhood. I think I've talked about Everhood on the podcast before. Very strange kind of Undertale-like aesthetic, but it's like a rhythm game, but like rhythm bullet hell, where there is, enemy like attacks coming at you from a track, like a Rock Band like situation, but you're having to dodge all the notes. And that game gets crazy by the end. Like, the way that the screen is just like flipping around or distorting, and it has a very like high concept existential thing happening at the very end. It is nuts. I definitely, if you are into Undertale, check out Underhood, or Everhood, which it also had a sequel come out just this past month that I want to check out as well. It looks the same but different. Like, the setting looks different, but the like kind of core gameplay looks about the same. I don't know. I haven't heard a ton of people talk about it. Kind of the same whenever the original Everhood came out. I remember not a ton of people really talking it up, but people who were like really into indie games were saying like, hey, everyone pay attention. Like, you don't want to miss this thing. So I'll end up taking a look at that pretty soon, I think. And there was some other stuff that I played recently, but I think I have enough. I've talked about enough stuff on this. You've heard me yap enough on this podcast, so I think I will leave some of that other stuff for a later episode to talk about. So I think that's going to be it for the episode this week. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this episode of Squared Circle Strafe. Leave us a nice review on Apple Podcasts if you like the show. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Uzi Neon. If you want to catch more of me talking about some real nerdy stuff, you can follow the Didn't Get All of It podcast to hear me and the rest of the Fatal 4 hosts talk about the latest and greatest in professional wrestling. You can also sign up for our Patreon to get exclusive access to our Discord, as well as bonus podcast content and the satisfaction of supporting independent podcasting media. Head to patreon.com/fatal4pod. That's Fatal, F-O-U-R pod. Thank you again for listening, and as always, enjoy your gaming.
You've been listening to a Fatal 4 podcast. Subscribe today wherever you get your podcasts and visit fatal4pod.com for more episodes, merchandise, and info on the Patreon.